There's a kind of wealth that never makes it into photos. It has no filter, generates no likes, impresses nobody at a dinner party. And maybe that's precisely why it's so rare and so devastatingly powerful. The truth nobody wants to sit with is this: most people who look wealthy aren't. And most people who are genuinely wealthy move through the world almost invisibly. Not by accident, by design. Philosophers understood this long before Instagram existed. Socrates said that someone who isn't content with what they have wouldn't be content with what they want either. It sounds almost too simple, but think about what it actually means. That dissatisfaction doesn't live in things. It lives in the person chasing them. Real wealth begins exactly there, in that recognition. Not in the world outside you, but in what you've decided to see within yourself. That's not resignation. It's the opposite. It's understanding that there is a fundamental difference between growing because you want to build something and running because you're terrified of looking small. A person operating from genuine abundance makes financial decisions from a completely different place. She invests, she learns, she waits. Not because patience comes naturally, but because she understands that time is the only asset that works for you while you sleep. Compounding doesn't care how it looks on a feed. It just works, quietly, for whoever is disciplined enough to let it. And discipline here doesn't mean deprivation. It means direction. We live in an era where anything can arrive in under 24 hours, where instant reward has become an unspoken right. But the best investments, in real estate, in markets, in education, in people, require time to mature. The ones who can't wait pay for it. Literally, they trade long-term security for short-term appearance, and they do it over and over again, each time telling themselves it's the last time. There's also the myth of relentless hustle, this cultural glorification of exhaustion as proof of ambition. Real wealth isn't built in burnout. It's built in consistency. There is a profound difference between running without direction and moving with intention. The people who have built genuine, lasting wealth are often the quietest in the room. They don't interrupt conversations to mention what they own. They don't need to. The stillness they carry says everything. Which brings us to the part most people don't want to examine honestly. Ostentation is not about money. It is about fear. At its core, the compulsive need to show what you have is answering a question nobody asked out loud. Am I enough? The philosopher Sartre wrote about how we construct our sense of self through the gaze of others. And that idea has never been more visceral than it is today, in a world of curated feeds and carefully staged moments. The influencer who spends hours composing the perfect shot beside an imported car isn't sharing a memory. She's requesting confirmation. And the confirmation arrives. A like, a comment, a second of recognition, and then it evaporates. The void returns, slightly larger than before. It's a cycle that feeds on itself. The next purchase, the next trip, the next display. Each one more necessary, each one less satisfying. And the comparison, which seems harmless enough at first, corrodes from the inside. Because the moment you start measuring your value by what someone else has, you have already lost that race. There will always be someone with more. Always. That finish line moves every time you get close. The cost of this is not just financial, though the financial cost alone is staggering. It's emotional, it's psychological. It hollows out identity. People who live for the image spend enormous energy managing perceptions and almost none building anything real. The relationships they attract are transactional, built on what they project rather than who they are. And somewhere underneath all of it, at a level they may not openly admit, they sense the emptiness of it. The wealth is borrowed, the validation is fleeting, and the person behind the display is often more lost than anyone around them realizes. Real wealth looks and feels entirely different. It looks like the woman who chooses a quiet Sunday with people she loves over an event that would make a good story, who invests in knowledge that will never trend, who has a solid emergency fund and sleeps well because of it. Not because it became a talking point, but because that kind of security is silent and completely real. Who gives generously, not to be seen giving, but because she understands that wealth that doesn't move doesn't grow. These are the people whose net worth, in every sense of that phrase, only increases with time. The true measure of what someone has built is in the quality of their relationships, the clarity of their values, and the freedom to make choices based on what genuinely matters to them, rather than what society demands they want. It's waking up without the low-grade anxiety of maintaining a facade. It's owing no one an explanation for the life you've chosen. And here is the paradox that cuts deepest. The more someone is truly wealthy, the less they feel the need to prove it. The need to display is inversely proportional to the solidity of what's been built. Deep roots don't require noise to stay standing. So how does one actually make this transition? How do you move from performance into real construction? There is no shortcut, and it doesn't happen all at once. It begins with a question that is genuinely uncomfortable. Why do I need others to see me as successful? The honest answer is rarely flattering. It usually involves an old fear, an inherited belief, a wound that was never really examined. Descartes wrote that caring for one's own well-being is the first study of anyone who has value for themselves, and that includes the kind of well-being that nobody else can see. You cannot build real wealth while hemorrhaging energy trying to impress people who are, in most cases, too busy trying to impress someone else. Self-reflection isn't a vague spiritual exercise. It's a practical, strategic skill. Asking yourself why you buy what you buy, why you display what you display, why a certain comment unsettles you more than it should. These questions, answered with real honesty, reveal the patterns that are costing you more than you've calculated. They reveal the places where insecurity has been disguised as lifestyle. Once you begin to see those patterns, the next step is deliberate redirection. Not a dramatic overhaul. A quiet, consistent reorientation of what you're actually investing in. Moving away from the transient, the things that depreciate the moment they leave the store, and toward the things that compound. Education, health, relationships built on substance rather than status. Experiences that actually change how you think, not just how you appear. Setting goals matters here, but the nature of those goals has to shift. Goals built around acquisition feed the same cycle. Goals built around becoming more capable, more grounded, more genuinely free, those are the ones that create lasting change. They're also the hardest to post about, which is part of the point. Gratitude, for all its overuse as a concept, functions in a remarkably concrete way in this context. When you genuinely begin to see value in what already exists, in your current resources, your relationships, your health, the things you've already built, the scarcity mindset starts to loosen its grip. And it is from the scarcity mindset that ostentation grows. The desperate need to prove you have, because somewhere inside, you still don't believe it. Building a sense of self-worth that doesn't depend on external approval is, without question, the most difficult and the most profitable work available to you. Because when you no longer need anyone's validation, you stop making decisions for an audience. You start investing honestly in your development, in the right people, in the projects that align with your actual values. And then with time, real wealth begins to accumulate. Not in photos, in life. It can start small. Maybe it's reducing the hours spent on platforms designed to make you feel behind. Maybe it's stopping the purchases that fill a space they were never capable of filling. Maybe it's beginning to invest an amount that feels almost embarrassingly modest. But that will matter enormously in a decade. Maybe it's simply spending an afternoon doing something that genuinely restores you, with no documentation required. The social pressure won't dissolve. It will keep existing, keep testing you. But when you have genuine clarity about what you're building and why, that pressure loses the hold it had. You stop running in circles and begin moving towards something with actual weight and meaning. The wealth that lasts is not the kind that shows, it's the kind that holds. It's what remains when the feed doesn't matter, when the room is empty, when what's left at the end of the day is the quiet satisfaction of knowing you lived according to something real. That cannot be purchased. Which is exactly why so few people have it. The lifestyle of someone who has genuinely built wealth is rarely what the world imagines it to be. There's no dramatic reveal, no carefully orchestrated moment of display. It's quieter than that. More grounded. The truly wealthy person isn't defined by what she consumes, but by how she moves through the world. The integrity behind her decisions, the depth of what she's cultivated, the simplicity she's chosen not out of limitation, but out of genuine preference. Think about the woman who has everything she needs and feels no particular urge to announce it. She's not driving the most conspicuous car. She's not posting every meal, every trip, every acquisition. She invests in her personal growth with the same seriousness she brings to her financial decisions. And she contributes to causes that actually align with her values, not because it looks good, but because it means something to her. Her wealth is visible in the peace she carries, in the quality of her attention, in the kind of presence she has in her room. Not loud, just undeniable. This is where the real contrast becomes stark. The person living for appearance is constantly performing. The person living from genuine wealth is simply living. And that distinction, subtle as it sounds, changes everything. The decisions you make, the people you attract, the relationship you have with your own time. Time. That's another place where true wealth reveals itself, and it's one of the most honest indicators available. How someone spends their hours when no one is watching, when there's nothing to document, when the choice serves only them. That says more about what they've built than any display ever could. The truly wealthy are intentional with their time in a way that the approval-seeking never quite managed to be, because they're not allocating hours to maintenance of an image. They invest time in health, in depth of knowledge, in the relationships that actually nourish them. They understand, in a way that's almost physical, that time is the one thing that cannot be recovered. Spent poorly, no amount of money compensates for it. And then there's generosity. Not the kind performed for an audience, the charity gala attendance, the donation casually mentioned in conversation, but the quiet, consistent kind. The truly wealthy give because they understand something that takes most people years to grasp. That holding everything tightly doesn't make you richer. It makes you smaller. Real wealth circulates. It invests in others, mentors where it can, offers resources not as a transaction, but as an expression of actual values. This kind of generosity enriches both directions simultaneously, and it cannot be faked convincingly for very long. What emerges from all of this is a portrait of wealth that looks almost nothing like what popular culture has taught us to recognize. No dramatic signifiers, no performance, just a life built with intention, on a foundation of values that don't shift with trends or social approval. A life where quality consistently wins over quantity, where depth matters more than breadth, where the person has understood, really understood, not just intellectually but in her bones, that more possessions bring more responsibility, more maintenance, more noise, and almost never more genuine happiness. The relationships that form around real wealth are different too. And this is perhaps the most underestimated dimension of what it means to truly prosper. The ostentatious attract admirers, people drawn to the image, to what proximity to that image might offer them. These connections are inherently fragile because they're built on something external, and therefore something that can disappear. The moment the display falters, the crowd adjusts accordingly. But the person whose wealth is real, whose character is the actual offering, she attracts differently. The people who come toward her are drawn to her values, her groundedness, her way of engaging with the world. These relationships have substance. They're built on mutual respect, on genuine shared interest, on the kind of trust that develops only when people show up as themselves, rather than as a curated version of themselves. These are the connections that endure, that deepen over time rather than eroding, that constitute, in the end, one of the richest things a life can contain. There's a particular loneliness that lives inside the performance of wealth that rarely gets acknowledged. The person surrounded by admirers but known by no one. The one who can't relax into an ordinary moment because ordinary moments don't photograph well. The one who has organized her entire existence around an impression, and who suspects, in quieter moments, that the impression is all there is. That isolation is real, and it's one of the most expensive costs of the ostentatious life. More expensive, arguably, than the debt often required to sustain it. Authentic connection, by contrast, is only possible when you show up without the armor of performance. And that vulnerability, that willingness to be seen without the props, is itself a form of wealth. It takes security to be simple. It takes genuine abundance to stop proving. Now the transition. Because understanding all of this intellectually is one thing. Actually shifting the way you live is another. And it would be dishonest to suggest otherwise. Moving from a life organized around external validation to one organized around authentic values is not a single decision. It's a daily practice, often unglamorous, sometimes frustrating, frequently challenged by a world that will continue rewarding appearance over substance in ways that are hard to ignore. The culture doesn't change because you've had an insight. The pressure remains. What changes is your relationship to it. The first real step is confronting what's actually driving the behavior. Not at the surface level. Not, I like nice things, but underneath that. What is the fear that makes approval feel necessary? Where did the belief come from that your worth requires external confirmation? These questions aren't comfortable, and the answers rarely arrive cleanly, but they're the questions that matter. Philosopher René Descartes placed the care of one's own well-being, mental and emotional, not just physical, as foundational to any life worth building. You cannot construct something real on a foundation of unexamined fear. At some point, the examination is unavoidable. Self-reflection here is not navel-gazing, it's excavation. It means being willing to look honestly at the patterns you've developed, why you compete, why you compare, why the opinions of people you barely know can still land with such disproportionate weight. It means recognizing the external pressures that shape those patterns and deciding, consciously, which ones you're done carrying. From there, the work becomes one of deliberate redirection. Shifting focus from what you want to project onto what you actually want to build. Setting goals that reflect a long-term vision of genuine fulfillment rather than short-term approval. Investing in education that changes your thinking, not just your credentials. Nurturing relationships that require you to actually show up, not just show off. Contributing to something beyond yourself in ways that feel true rather than strategic. Gratitude enters here not as a platitude but as a practical reorientation. The scarcity mindset, the anxious, grasping, never-enough quality that drives so much of the ostentatious behavior, loosens when you train yourself to genuinely register what you already have. This doesn't mean suppressing ambition. It means anchoring your ambition in something real, rather than in the perpetual, exhausting gap between what you have and what you think you need others to believe you have. Developing self-worth that is genuinely independent of others' opinions is arguably the most transformative shift available. It's also the slowest. There are no shortcuts through it. But on the other side of that work is something remarkable. The freedom to make decisions purely on the basis of what matters to you. To invest without performing the investment. To live without narrating the life for an audience. That freedom is not a small thing. It is, in many ways, the whole point. Start wherever you are. It might look like stepping back from social media for long enough to remember what your own thoughts feel like, without the static. It might look like one honest financial decision made for future you, rather than for present appearances. It might look like saying no to something expensive and unnecessary, and sitting with the discomfort of that, noticing that the discomfort passes and something steadier takes its place.